Hello, this is Catherine from Accelerated Reader, reading books for you. Today, I will be reading Chapter 2 from A Little Twirly Story of Candy by Debra Harkins and Thanh, Huynh. Illustrated by Sergio Drumond. Before I begin reading, I would like to give a big thanks to the authors and Purple Owl Publishing for sending me this book to read on my channel. In the description below, I've included links where you may find and purchase this book. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Chapter 2. Where did candy start? Life can be bittersweet, but only you control the sugar. Michelle Parsons. This chapter is about the origins of candy in the US, or at least that is how we started. Figuring out how and when it began is just as sticky as defining what is candy. You see, people have been making candy in their homes since the time of the ancient Egyptians. You might have seen pictures of Cleopatra and her beloved honey balls. In the Roman cities of the time, dulcia, or candy, was sold in candy shops, and recipes were available for making dulcia at home, dates stuffed with nuts and soaked in honey. As traders and knights of the Middle Ages came back from the Crusades, only the wealthy could afford to become sweet on sugar. At first, candy was used as medicine, and later as a spice to hide the taste of rancid food, yuck, and later as a preservative for fruits, creating jellies and jams. From the Middle Ages and even now, English people love their sweets more than any other culture, with the English royalty eating so much candy, or sweetmeats, as they called sugar. Their teeth often turned black. Reminder here, don't forget to brush your teeth after eating sweets. Hey, did you notice we said how much the royalty loved their candy? Well, there is where our candy story gets, well, a little bitter. We need to talk about sugar and where the sugar came from that is used to make our beloved candy. Remember, in Chapter 1, we said that sugar cane and sugar beets are the main sugar used to make candy. So, let's start with sugar cane since a lot of the sugar in our candy comes from sugar cane. We'll talk about the sugar from sugar beets in a bit. Sugar cane is a very tall, very thick grass that grows in tropical climates where water is abundant and heat and humidity is high. Sugar cane originated in New Guinea way back in 7000 BC and around 327 BC in India and expanded throughout the world via trade routes. Speaking of trading, you've probably heard the stories of Christopher Columbus setting out to find quicker spice trade routes rather than going down and around Africa to get spices from India. What is less well known is that Columbus's father-in-law, Bartolomeo Prestrello, was a major overseer of sugarcane plantations in Porto Salvo and Madeira, along with some other smaller islands. Christopher probably watched how his father-in-law Bart's plantations made him super rich. So, although Christopher wanted to find easier ways to get spices, he also was probably looking for places to grow sugarcane. How do you know that, you say? Well, because Columbus not only knew how rich one could get from sugarcane plantations from his father-in-law's adventures, but on his second voyage to the New World, Christopher brought back cuttings of sugarcane from the Caribbean. from Haiti to be exact. Columbus also likely came across cocoa on his voyages, but like many, he did not recognize its value. The wealthy fell in love with sugar so much that they wanted more of it, and a market quickly opened for producing more sugar. Side note, at this time, sweets made from sugar were not thought of as just for kids. Nope. When royalty in Europe ate sweets from this sugar, it was considered healthy, exotic, and classy. Candy made from cane sugar was also likely still being made in people's homes or in fancy candy shops. Back to the sugar plantations. More sugar plantations meant finding more land to grow the sugarcane. The best places to grow sugarcane is in the hot and steamy tropics. And so a quick race to conquer and own the tropic islands in the Caribbean happened between Spain, France, and England. The English loved their candy more than any other country in the world, so it's no surprise to learn that the English created the largest sugar plantations in the Caribbean, including in Barbados, Jamaica, Antigua, and Montserrat. The British loved their sugar so much that they engaged in huge naval battles with France and Spain to maintain control over the sugar-producing Caribbean islands. So you say, what's the big deal? Yay, yay, yay. Sugar plantations, tropics, Columbus, naval battles, Caribbean, and get to the point already. Talk about candy, candy, candy. Okay, we're getting there, but first, who do you think were the workers on these labor-intensive, stifling hot sugar plantations? It wasn't Columbus, or his father-in-law, or any of the royalty, or even the regular people like you and me. At first, the Spanish, French, and English who conquered the West Indies wanted the land to grow tobacco, cotton, and sugar, and they tried to have the island natives do this back-breaking work. But many of the natives knew the terrain and quickly ran away. Then the Europeans brought in indentured slaves, often troublemakers or criminals from England, Spain, and France, to do this difficult work. But there were not enough of these folks. Once these indentured slaves completed their indentured time, they hightailed it out of there as fast as they could. Did we say this was back-breaking, deadly work? No one wanted to work on the sugar plantations. Finally, the English turned to slaves. Yep, African slaves from the African nations of Sierra Leone, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Nigeria, and Guinea. You see, the slaves did not speak the language of their captors or islanders and had nowhere to run once on these tiny islands in the Caribbean. So, just how many African slaves were shipped to the Caribbean to work on these harsh sugar plantations? The British shipped around 250,000 African slaves to the Caribbean during the 16th century. In the 1700s, at the height of West Indian sugar production, the British shipped 45,000 African slaves to the Caribbean every year. With so much sugar being made from all these slaves, the price of sugar dropped a lot. The price dropped so much that the regular English people and others could afford to buy sugar. So much candy was being made at this time that business-minded people started to think of ways to make more candy. And this is about the time that mass-produced candy, that is, machine-made candy, arrived, cutting the cost of candy even more. Sugar making on plantations from the sugarcane fields to sugar boiling. So, we finally get to the even sadder side of the candy story. Sugar, in the form of sugarcane, since its very beginnings, has as its basic ingredient slavery. Without slavery, sugar and most candy would likely have been rare throughout the world. This is definitely a bitter bit of candy to swallow. Danger: more bitter swallowing ahead, as the price of candy dropped due to the high supply of sugar and the ability to mass-produce candy. The regular people in England could now afford to buy what was once only for the rich. So, sugar allowed all the English people to be able to have candy while creating world discrimination by enslaving Africans on the sugar plantations in the Caribbean. Twirly had hurt, even more bitter than an atomic warhead or even toxic waste. Okay, you say, I won't eat sugar. I'll have chocolate instead. Not so fast, candy hopper. Two problems with that option. 1. Chocolate without sugar is too bitter to eat. 2. Chocolate has its own bitter story. Before we go further, let's return to the sugar beet for a bit. Sugar beet, called free sugar, became an alternative to slave-produced cane sugar in the 19th century, when the means for extracting the sucrose became more available. Sugar beet grows in more temperate climates, where there is fertile soil and adequate rainfall. Mechanically harvested, sugar beets do not have the same nasty slave past as sugar cane. Sucrose from sugar beets still only represents about 35% of the total sucrose produced globally. The U.S. is the third largest global producer of sucrose from sugar beets, with Russia and France as the two top largest producers. Within the U.S., sugar beets represent 55% of sucrose produced. Yay for free sugar! I bet you were wondering what's happening within the world of sugarcane today. No, you say. Well, you know, we're gonna tell you anyway, right? So, you say, okay, but it has to be better now, right? Don't you love the way we talk for you? Hee hee. Well, as we candy lovers search for some good news in this bittersweet tale, we can hang on tight to the following facts. Sugarcane production is not as nasty as it once was during the 1600s to 1800s, as slavery is all but banned in much of the world. And the U.S. produces 90% of its own sugarcane, so most U.S. sugar workers get paid a decent wage. The rest of the sugarcane used in the U.S. is imported from 15 other countries, located in South America, Australia, and South Africa, with the top 5 being Mexico, Brazil, Philippines, Guatemala, and Dominican Republic. Sadly, Brazil and the Dominican Republic have working conditions that resemble slavery. However, the sugarcane imported from these two countries represents less than 0.025% of all the sugarcane consumed within the U.S. For the sake of finishing our story before you finish your lolly, we will now confine our little candy story to the U.S. However, narrowing our focus to the U.S. still proved as messy as having gum stuck to your shoe. As many know, the Native American Indians lived in the U.S. before the U.S. became, well, the U.S. And to complicate our story even more, the U.S. did not officially exist until 144 years after the colonists arrived. So, here was our conundrum. What historical measure should we use as the place where candy started? When we say place, do we mean candy makers across current U.S. territory, regardless of time? or should we begin in the year of the U.S.'s official birth, 1776, for anyone who didn't pass U.S. history, including only those territories belonging to the U.S. at that point in time? We warned you this would get sticky. Since this is our little candy story, we decided on using 1776 as the starting point of candy in the U.S. After all, no U.S. means no U.S. history. All territories of the U.S. as of 2018 will be given their duties in later chapters. So, where was commercial candy being made, and what kind of candies were being made in 1776 when the Declaration of Independence was signed? Well, hold on to your Skittles, because Candyland is about to get wild again. In our search, we found two big names, Nicholas Bayard II, who made hard candy, and John Hannon, who made chocolate. Whether for eating or drinking, we're not quite sure. Nicholas Bayard II. In 1730, Nicholas Bayard II from New York City opened the first sugar refinery near the current New York City Stock Exchange. Eventually, he owned two sugar houses, named Bayard's Sugar House, that produced refined sugar. Bayard also traded sugar for food with the Caribbeans, transporting the sugar to England, where the English used it to make sugar candy, later known as the penny candy circa 1830s. And then Bayard shipped his sugar candy to NYC to be sold. So, loyal reader, does this sugar making count as U.S. candy making? And if that little conundrum was not enough, Bayard's Sugar House refined both sugar and had a sugar artisan from Europe making sugar candy for him, although it still took place in the U.S. At the time, Bayard advertised his sugar candy for its medicinal uses. You're probably thinking, what the flubber nugget? But we'll explain. In the ancient year of 1730, note the sarcasm, people of all classes didn't eat foods based on vitamin or nutrient intake. Anemia was always a potential problem. It was an epidemic in the lower classes and could sometimes be found in the richer folks who were overworked or on special weight loss diets. Women. To counteract the fainting spells and dizziness that may come with anemia, people would take sugar water or sweet lozenges. Does taking sweet lozenges for fainting spells and dizziness count as candy? Do you need a sweet lozenge now to deal with this dizzying candy story? By 1776, Bayard was, well, dead. He died in 1765 to be exact, leaving his estate to his son Nicholas III. Yes, another Nicholas. 1730s Bayard was Nicholas II. The business would last until 1789, through the Revolution. Throughout the life of the two sugar refineries, only the wealthy could afford to buy the sugar lozenge. We are not sure whether to call this medicinal lozenge candy. John Hannon, America's Chocolate. In 1765, Irish immigrant John Hannon built the first chocolate mill in Milton, a former sawmill financed by a Dr. James Baker. Then, in 1768, after the sawmill was sold, Hannon moved his chocolate business to a fulling mill in Dorchester, Massachusetts. What's a fulling mill, you ask, or not? Who knows? It may have been or is a mill for Old Baker's Chocolate Mill in Dorchester, Massachusetts, filling up bellies or pastries or pots, pot bellies. But we really doubt it. After a bit of Googling to Wikipedia, we found that fulling is the cleaning of cloth to make it thicker. What it has to do with the plot? Not much. Now back to the topic. In 1776, Hannon was the official owner of the chocolate business, making him the first chocolatier in the U.S. Time for another fun or not so fun fact. In the years 1775 and 1776, a certain place named Dorchester Heights that overlooks Boston Harbor and downtown was used as a battleground of sorts to fight against the British and British loyalists. How did this chocolate business survive during this tumultuous time, you ask? You probably didn't, but we will answer anyway. After the Boston Tea Party of May 10, 1773, the colonists boycotted tea and went for other beverages. The replacement? Coffee. Oh wait, and hot chocolate too. So did Hannon profit off the war? We'll let you decide. In 1779, John Hannon died. After a battle with Hannon's wife, she wasn't the best businesswoman. James Baker took over the business in 1780 and built the Baker's chocolate empire that still exists today. Now, many might say Baker's chocolate is not candy, nor even edible chocolate for that matter. So maybe Baker's Chocolate Mill in Dorchester does not count as the birthplace of candy, but Baker's Company, now called the Baker Chocolate Company, claims to be one of the first chocolate companies, and if you consider chocolate to be candy, then Hannon's chocolate is the origins of candy manufacturing in the U.S. Guess you'll have to decide if you consider Baker's chocolate to be candy. Maybe you could ask their parent company, Kraft Foods. So what is our answer to the origins of candy in the U.S.? Well, it seems pretty clear that Nicholas Bayard was the first person to make and commercially sell hard candy in the U.S. Now, the chocolate story is melting into a bit of a mess. Did Hannon make drinking chocolate? Or did he make edible chocolate that we know today? Or did he only make ground chocolate and let the consumers decide whether to drink, bake, or eat this chocolate? Let's take a look in the chocolate box. If you're confused, look down the page, not your feet. Egyptian honey balls, tiger nut sweets, ingredients, 7 ounces of fresh dates, approximate, 1 tablespoon cinnamon powder to taste, 2 tablespoons roughly chopped walnuts, 2 tablespoons finely ground almonds, honey, acacia honey if possible, a little water. Directions: 1. Blend the date with the water to form a rough paste. 2. Add the cinnamon to taste and chopped walnuts. 3. Roll the mixture into small balls. 4. Coat in honey. 5. Coat with ground almonds and serve. 2000 BC, Egyptians make first candy, honey balls. 250 AD, Indians make sugar candies. 500 AD, medicinal candy only available to wealthy. 950 AD, Arabs invented caramel, built first sugar refinery. 1493 AD, Columbus brings sugar cane seeds to Americans. 1600s, English and French established sugar cane plantations in West Indies. 1765 AD. First chocolate factory in US, Baker's Chocolate. 1800 AD. Sugar accessible to masses. UK and US boil sugar with nuts and fruit. 1848 AD. State of Maine makes first gum using spruce tree sap. 1850s AD. 380 candy factories in US and chocolate is mass produced. Candy, fill in the blanks. Feel free to pause this video so that you may complete this activity. 1. In the Middle Ages, only the 8 sweets. 2. Sugar cane originated in 3. Brought sugar cane cuttings back from the Caribbean to Spain. 4. Spain, France, and had many naval battles fighting for islands in the West Indies. 5. Triangle trade routes included Caribbean, Europe, and 6. Slaves left the sugar plantations as soon as they could. 7. British shipped slaves a year from Africa to Caribbean. 8. Had the largest sugar plantations in the Caribbean. 9. Grow in temperate climates. 10. The first sugar refinery house in the US was started by. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In the description below, I've included links where you may find and purchase this book. Stay tuned next week for the next chapter. Here are the answers to the Chapter 2 Fill in the Blanks activity.